Jamie, what is the IDW and did it succeed?
Straight into it. The intellectual dark web was, I suppose, a group of people who were all getting frustrated about the same sort of things at the same time. And with the rise of new media, podcasting, Joe Rogan in particular, basically all these unbelievably painful things that so many people had been noticing. Finally, there was an outlet where these things could be talked about. And a whole heap of reasonably intelligent people realized that we were all seeing the same problems and that they were real. So you've just popped up Barry Weiss's article. So things like the human mind's a blank slate, which is one of the many intellectual atrocities that the universities have been pumping out for decades, if not centuries. Wokeness, of course, gone crazy. Political correctness, identity politics. All of that stuff, which has been cooking in the unis for a long time. And, God knows it drove me insane through the early 2000s. And it turns out the problems are throughout the world, or at least throughout the English speaking world. And my sense is the IDW was just a kind of a rational, reasonable conversation about these insane problems that should never even exist, but somehow have taken over the universities and metastasized and spread out into the wider world. That's my sense of what the IDW was. Obviously, all of those topics, there's a lot more to be said. Did it succeed? Yeah. It's really, really hard to say. We're still quite close to it. The IDW, in many ways, a lot of the ideas that the IDW talked about have now become essentially part of right-wing, or let's say center-right politics, which is like sort of good in a way. Sorry?
Like what's an example?
Well, the anti-woke stuff, talking openly and critically about the whole trans thing, fighting, I suppose, for free speech, being critical of the universities, the institutions, thinking that men and women are actually biologically different beyond men being a bit taller at the population level. Like, a lot of these ideas are now just standard center-right stuff. And there's no reason that should have happened. I mean, the left could have changed up and just become held on to its liberal values, its good liberal values, not its bad liberal values. So I don't know if it's succeeded or if it's, it's kind of, politics has shifted. As I say, the center-right's taken it up to a degree. The left and the right ain't exactly what they used to be. But of course, the concern is that the IDW values, which were great, as happens to so many things, potentially become subtly corrupted. They become more two-dimensional talking points, and the culture wars roll on unchanged. So I don't know. Maybe the election of Trump was a moment where we hit peak woke, and it felt that way for a couple of months. But, I don't know. It feels like possibly, the woke left, whatever we want to call it, maybe they're doubling down and we're just going to keep rolling. Did they succeed? I don't know. Did they just inflame the culture wars and keep them going? Okay. Very hard to say. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, there's a lot here. Let's slow down and take it point by point. I think you're right about a lot of these things are center right, but I don't think that they're center right because people have adopted. All of a sudden, the center right came to reason. The fact that there are biological differences between men and women is just a fact, and the people on the identitarian left by and large, reject that fact. Certainly, that's what's taught in academia writ large. So, I've never understood. I'm perennially perplexed by why these are center-right issues. That's one thing. If you want to speak to that,
of course, it's weird because, because we're just dealing with facts here. So, when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, the sense always was that it was the, I don't know, the left, the center left, which was the place of free thinking and bohemia and expression. And, you know, I've got this like little module in my mind for, you know, 1980s movies. And there was always some dorky, daggy, whatever, lame, but still lovable school teacher who was always the, you know, the moderate leftist and always trying to teach the kids the classics and history. And that character, that sort of well-meaning, bumbling leftist, but good-hearted lover of history and literature, that used to be the left. That's like my caricature of the left when I was growing up. And now that figure just doesn't exist. If you care about history, literature, the classics, you know, facts, you have to be on the center right now almost. It's bizarre that should be the case.
Yeah, they ceded the territory. And I often feel that those criticisms are just purely ideologically driven. It's funny, you know, somebody sent me a link to something, and I've just been crazed busy. They're like, listen, you got to watch this. Take the time to watch this. And so, I shouldn't have watched it, but I did. And basically, it was a guy who came out with a criticism of this book in which I published a piece. Lawrence Krauss published his book, The War on Science. And he goes through it, and he basically, you know, attempts to eviscerate it. And I actually agreed with a lot of his criticisms. I thought, you know, he's like, well, why aren't you criticizing the right on this? Why? I mean, I completely agreed. But either he is so ignorant or so utterly ideological that he doesn't understand how a book is made. Like, it's not just like you write, you know, Krauss sends this out long before Trump even ran in the election. And then he gets, you know, you just have to go through this whole process. Like, well, you know, you get everybody submits a proposed piece, and then you write it, you know, he edits. I mean, it takes like a year and a half. It's a long process. And it was just it wasn't even specious. It was just so, again, maybe he's not a true vicious ideologue. Maybe he's just profoundly ignorant. And I'm willing to concede that, but I don't know. It's just so interesting. The age of polarization. Nobody can level a reasonable, thoughtful criticism. It's always like guilt by association. And that's what happens when half the population or a certain segment of half the population refuses to have a conversation with you. It's just,
I hear you.
They then lose those. So I think in essence, the IDW was about, and this is why I never considered myself directly in the IDW, but IDW adjacent, or excuse me, you laugh. Why you laugh? Because I know I'm in the book.
You're in the second tier. Like, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I've got this, you know, it's a little made up, but at the same time, as far as I'm concerned, you're one of the more significant figures. The whole grievance study affair and whatnot.
Yeah, and so I guess that's the thing with the IDW is you don't really, there's no like card of membership, you know. There's no like, and I know a lot of people place me there, but I've always kind of done my own thing. That's why also, in spite of everybody, I'm still lingering on your idea that this is a center right. That, you know, we don't mutilate children's genitals is now a
center right idea. That's crazy.
It's now a center right position. You know, what is a woman? I don't know. You got to be on the center right to figure that one out. I don't know. What about
you? Got to be a Nazi. You got to be a Nazi to answer that one.
Is my mom a woman? I don't know. Who knows? You know, Jesus was a trans person, and all these people. It's just God. It's just a level of just, and you know, I've been starting to wonder if it's just that just people love drama so much. You know, they're just so drama driven. I don't know the answer, but so the IDW, Eric Weinstein coined the term. The IDW comes along. They try to move the needle on the idea of discourse and conversation. They they speak bluntly about facts and evidence, certain things in the culture wars. This causes a very large subset of the population who are already deranged to become even more deranged and vitriolic in their incessant attacks on these people. Some of my IDW friends have guns all around the house, bulletproof armor, etc. Everybody, it's just a level of craziness going into their neighborhoods and putting signs saying they're transphobic, they hate black people, they hate I mean, it's just so it's so crazy. Even somebody at the university gave a talk, my former university, I will not mention, said that I hate Chinese people, which is completely my daughter's Chinese. That's the other thing. I don't know, it just strikes me as such a profound insincerity on the part of these people. They're telling me that I hate Chinese people. Okay, well, you adopt a daughter, 2.5, who's disabled. When you adopt a disabled child of another race, maybe we can have that conversation. But until then, shut the fuck up. But hey, all right, so let's bracket that. So it was a slow demise, or was it instantaneous?
The IDW.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, there was the quite neat bookended moment. Whenever Trump lost the election, and and there was something of a fracture in the IDW, I suppose in some way. Interestingly, around Sam Harris, Sam maintained his anti-Trump perspective quite strongly, and other IDW figures were quite pro-Trump, and Sam handed in his imaginary IDW card, which I should say, it is actually good that the IDW is barely a group and it's just people doing their own thing. That's actually a very strong point. But yeah, but it's interesting because I ponder this a lot. Everyone got sick of using the name IDW. It got old. But as I was writing the book through, I guess, 2021, 22, 23, it's all the same conversations kept happening. Almost, okay, sure, there was the COVID stuff and maybe a bit of climate change, but everyone kept saying the same things and doing the same things. So my sense was more that it just kind of merged with, it was just a part of normal cultural wars discourse, normal political culture. And then as we were saying before, it increasingly got taken up by the center right. And I think Trump harnessed it very well in the latest election. But so it's the name itself kind of vanished, but the ideas, the phenomenon, it just kept going, really. That's my sense.
Okay. Okay. So somebody put a comment here. It's I'll be blunt, it seems like a gross the intellectual dark web is just the same 3 talking points over and over. We get it. You hate woke, you hate all institutions. You want a monarch. It doesn't even rise to the level of the straw man, but I'll give you an opportunity to comment on that.
Yeah, sorry, what am I commenting on?
The intellectual dark web is just the same 3 talking points over and over. We get it. You hate woke, you hate all institutions, and you want a monarch.
Sorry, yeah. Right there, yeah. Obviously I worry.
An intentional mischaracterization, but okay. All right, that's fine. I don't know this person. That's fine. I'm happy to talk about it.
I'm conscious that it's the same stuff that keeps getting talked about, and it's, when I'm writing the book, I'm thinking, oh man, this is getting old, even though I'm trying to write a history or something and basically lock it all in, not tightly, neatly in one place. But the thing is that the problems we're battling against, we or whatever, the IDW, they're the same too. I keep teaching at university. I keep coming across the same completely insane and bizarre epistemological rubbish, which you can't even believe students are being taught this stuff, and they'd be better off not going to uni at all. Their brains are getting so broken by the education. So if things do go round in circles a bit, it's like a good political campaign. You come to one lamppost and there's the slogan. You come to the next lamppost, it's the slogan again. It's a little repetitive, but at the same time, I don't know. What are you going to do when the problems endure? I don't know. I don't know what to do other than keep reiterating the same points.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just want to. That's such a fascinating comment. I don't know. So I wonder if people just go into these things to just troll people. I find it fascinating. Or they have a penchant for drama, so they want to do that. Like, you hate all institutions and want a monarch. And then
Okay.
I kind of say to myself, well, why am I even giving this consideration since it's so insane? But it's okay. Anyway,
Monarch. No, hang on. Let me just address that one again. I mean, look, well, I mean, as well, one of the good things about IDW type stuff is hopefully an interest in nuance. And so we can say, you know, all institutions are good all the time. You know, we shouldn't have any institutions. Obviously, there's a sort of middle path where you can say many aspects of a lot of institutions are pretty broken at the moment. And okay, every institution.
Right. We don't want ideologically captured institutions. We want value neutral institutions, for example, universities. And how does that translate into hating all? And where did the monarch thing come? I don't know why you even put that.
Trump's the monarch, apparently. Trump's the monarch.
And I don't want to say anymore. That's just too stupid. Okay. So breaking, President Trump has just signed an executive order to eliminate DEI-driven, desperate, quote unquote, desperate impact theory from government agencies and instead to focus on merit and results. And there's Linda McMahon there with President Trump. So what is the relationship between the IDW and DEI and merit?
Yeah, it's one of those things that are at the very heart of the matter. In the great Enlightenment tradition, this is like the best aspect of liberalism. You know, the whole thing the Enlightenment's pushing against was a kind of feudalism where you're just born to a certain, you know, a certain path in life. And Enlightenment values, you know, at their core is the idea that, you know, you can work hard, make something of yourself. And obviously this, you know, this can get kind of hackneyed in the, you know, the American dream, which isn't exactly available to everyone, but it's a much better option than you're just born to a certain station in life. You know, the idea is that anyone can become anything, and yeah, using reasoning and evidence and skills, you become successful. And there's no real other way to for a society to function. So you get rid of merit and you put people into a station based on superficial, you know, identity characteristics, and they're not even identity. Then the whole liberal edifice, the very best bits of it, just it just collapses. And it's like, it's, you know, one of the classic discussion points is equality of outcome versus equality of opportunity. I mean, exactly. I'm a huge fan of. I would like our education systems to be far better. So yeah, so that, yeah. Anyway, you go.
Well, so okay, so there's a lot to talk about here. So Harvard, so NYU's website was just hacked. I don't know if you saw that, and they posted SAT scores from various racial groups. And maybe Reed can find that and pull that up. And we now know, I mean, the data is overwhelming that there is systemic discrimination against Asians. So they're right. I mean, as I've said all along, I believe there's systemic discrimination, just not against the groups that you say that they're. NYU average admitted SAT scores.
I've seen that.
Yeah, what's real? Reed, keep that up. What's really interesting is if you tease out Ashkenazi Jews from the whites go down, and Ashkenazi Jews of the Asians, but very few people do that. And then, so when you look at this 1485, and they put these bogus metrics like on SAT scores, they're just personality test. I mean, on their essays is personality test. By the way, and thanks, Reed, for pulling that up. By the way, University of Austin now has one number. There's no diversity. You can speak 20 languages. You can have 10 Nobel Prizes. There's just SATs. But one of the things that I'd like to talk about with you, and correct me if I'm wrong, I read your manuscript a while ago, but you didn't mention Jews in the book. And if you've been following,
there's a couple of mention of Jews.
Oh, okay. So Reed, can you pull up the so Greg Lucan, I just retweeted this. Jewish students aren't allowed to walk through Yale's campus anymore. Pro-Palestinian students have pulled these kinds of blockades for years now. They have the right to protest. I completely agree. You can criticize any government, any policy. You want to criticize the US, you want to criticize North Korea, you want to criticize Russia, Ukraine, you do anything you want. They have the right to protest, but do not have the right to block students. And if they're specifically targeting Jewish students, which they are, to prevent them from crossing, then that is not just harassment, but even assault, as blocking comes with an implicit threat that anyone trying to get through will be met with physical force. So here's this guy. I mean, so the thing I disagreed about, I almost didn't retweet this, is Yale needs to investigate. Yale's not going to investigate that. They're fucking rabid anti-Semitic. They hate Jews. Why would they? They love this stuff. So I mean, that's been my Reed disagrees with me, but that's been my working hypothesis for all along. So what is the relationship to? So okay. So what is the relationship between the IDW and Jews? And if you look at, like, who are you considering tier one? The people who Barry put in her New York Times piece?
Tier one, the Weinstein brothers, Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin, and maybe Claire Lehman, even though she's a bit of an outlier because she doesn't talk much, but because of Quillette.
Not Sam?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sam, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're more than half.
I knew I'd miss one. But that's it. Yeah.
More than half of them are Jews.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, and I always thought a lot of the backlash to this was because the vicious anti-Semitism that's out there, specifically in the universities. I mean, that's one of the things that, I mean, this is totally insane. It's 2025, and a Jewish guy can't walk on campus that he's paying tuition for. I mean, it's completely insane. And we expect that the Yale is going to carry out an investigation of the very thing that they're trying to perpetuate. No, of course not. They're not going to. They love this stuff. They don't want an investigation. That's totally crazy. Okay, so talk to me about. Okay, so there was considerable, and especially now, there's considerable disagreement among people who were formerly classified as IDW types. Now, you know. Peterson was just on. Rogan, Murray was.
Yeah, I saw that. I got to watch that. Yeah.
So full disclosure, I haven't watched the Murray Smith thing. I'm just really busy.
I watched Murray on Harris just a day or two ago, so I missed the Murray Smith thing, but I got the breakdown when he spoke to Sam Harris, which I thought was interesting. I don't know if I've seen Murray v. Harris before, but that was really good.
Okay, yeah, no, I haven't. Okay, so now there's a lot of, I can't really say it's infighting because there weren't specific conclusions that locked him in, right? There weren't particular things that they agreed on. They were kind of meta principles like free speech, merit, open inquiry.
But also like the trans stuff, the anti-woke stuff, the pro-West thing is, and not naive pro-West, but pro-Western values. That's a very strong through point. So yeah, there's quite a few. But
yeah, I mean, I fit into that category. I'm very, very much pro-West and pro-Western, and I believe that there are elements of. I'm not a radical egalitarian. I'm not a relativist. I'm certainly not an epistemological relativist, but I'm also not a cultural relativist either, or a moral relativist. So
yeah, I know. Yeah.
Or a cognitive relativist. So so I understand in that sense. But if you want to call those conclusions, I would say that they're, with the possible exception of trans stuff, they're kind of sweeping conclusions. They're very broad based. But then they're a kind of acrimony beset the group, if you want to call them a group, this loose conglomeration of figures in which they stopped talking to each other, or they got bitter or nasty. And what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, maybe you know more about it than I do because you know the people themselves. So, I mean, I'm watching a little bit more from afar and piecing it together on podcasts. But I suppose, again, maybe Sam Harris and Brett Weinstein. I mean, there was breakdown over COVID as well, and the extent to which, around the COVID vaccine. I mean, obviously Joe Rogan, I'm still a huge Rogan fan, but he obviously swings more conspiracy theory. So just in the sense that he he has a very wide, what would you call it, like initial filter, and he lets a lot of people through the gate. And I mean, I'm fine with that in many ways, because I'd rather that than prejudging and having a very narrow filter. Like, you know, I work at a university and there's just vast amounts of things you're not even allowed to talk about. So, you know, I'll take a few conspiracy theories, but, you know, Sam Harris, who's really, I mean, what could you say, like uber rational, uber evidence. I mean, yeah, so I suppose, yeah, he, in some, I don't know how much he broke with Joe or Brett or whatever, but it feels like they, you know, went their separate ways a bit. And as I already mentioned, the whole Trump thing, Sam's maintained his stance there, so that's caused something of a fracture with those who are more on the right. But as I say, it's hard for me to work out exactly who's not talking to who. I mean, just on the recent podcast with Douglas Murray, I mean, Sam still spoke positively of Rogan, but I note that he hasn't been on Rogan for quite a few years. So, you know, having been a regular visitor. So yeah, look, I don't know. I don't know the full details of the whole breakdown, but as I say, Trump, COVID, you know, that sort of stuff.
It's interesting because I know all of these people, and I'm at least friends, not friends with them. As I was telling Reed, I could never figure out, like when I was a kid, how all these actors knew all these other actors when they weren't in roles with them. But it's just, these are the circles you're in. I mean, there's just like a small number of people who do what we do, and you become friendly, and then some of those people you become friends, and then some of those people you become incredibly close friends. I mean, so I'm not going to name who, but some of these people are going to visit me this summer when I'm back in Hungary, and they visited me. But anyway, but my point is that, well, I have a few points. You know, I saw, I think I didn't really read it too much, but there was something between Constantine, who I consider a friend, and Brett, who I also consider a friend. You know, been to their houses, hung out with them, and know their families very well. And you know, I think that the key is, before anything happens, I always you know, text people and say, hey, or call them, and you know, let's see if we can talk this. I don't think everything needs to be political. I mean, everything needs to be public. I think that's an unnecessary, gratuitous even mistake that people make. I'm not sure why one would do that. I think the other thing that's kind of interesting is that people, you know, why look for the small points of disagreement? I mean, great. If you want to hash out small points of disagreement, that's fantastic. I think we should absolutely do that. And if you want to do that publicly, that's fantastic. I think we should be able to do that as well. But I think if you really want to move the needle, I mean, I was thinking about, you know, James Lindsay's Twitter feed. He's basically attacked everybody I know at this point. And I think for myself, I mean, he can do whatever he wants to do. He's a free agent. I'm not responsible for him. He's not responsible for me. He's still one of my best friends. For me, what works more is finding points of agreement with people, things that I think move the needle about significant issues, and usually issues that can be adjudicated fairly simply. Like, you just, you know, I'm getting back to the center right thing, you know, just really some really basic, obvious shit, and doing that. But I don't see that happened with the IDW. I saw this weird kind of infighting, the very thing that a lot of people were criticizing. I'm not saying it's ubiquitous among, you know, it's not among everybody all the time, but it was disconcerting to me, and it was rather pointless as well.
I mean, could it be one of those things, you know, whatever Eric Weinstein first started talking about, audience capture, is that, I mean, I wrote my PhD thesis about this sort of 15 years ago now, when I was just looking at the university around me and trying to understand why everyone was so damn corrupt, even though it sounded like they were saying good things. And so I tried to develop a whole model for understanding how things start out in one place and then they become corrupt. And it's like one of the great mysteries of the world. And we've seen something of that potentially with the IDW. You start out with ideas that are genuine and that are like a genuine response to genuine problems. But then those ideas become the very basis of your, what could I say, public identity, the very means by which you belong and gain power and gain status. And then when they slip into that other realm, it's then quite easy for them to become corrupted. So even though you're sort of saying the same things, they're not serving truth anymore, but instead they're serving belonging and power. And then once that kind of happens, then you start seeing the infighting and the bad faith. And so, I mean, we're all susceptible to it. I mean, you know, we've all got money worries and I don't know, I suppose status worries. And when a pathway of money and status opens up, before we know it, we're kind of going down there. Maybe I can try to say this. One of the most remarkable things is that when we belong to something and when we gain power, we feel good. And yet the idea of the good or goodness is still something quite different. The idea of the good or goodness is like we should understand the nature of reality, you know, what is, and then based on that, we can then figure out what we ought to do. And what we ought to do is what is good, you know, how we should find the food, how we should get the shelter, how we should, let's even say, stick up for the powerless. And yet that's one idea of the good in the real world. And yet at the same time, when we belong and when we seek power, we also feel good. And this is, hopefully I'll write a book about this in the next few years, but this is, for me, at the real philosophical depths of what we're struggling with, is that people think, you know, I was doing all these things that were genuinely good, but now it goes into this realm of corrupt belonging or corrupt power, and I still feel good. And you're like, no, you've gone to the other place, but you can't, it's very difficult to emotionally recognize when you've gone to the other place. Hopefully that's making sense. I'm just hitting you with one of my
it's making sense.
Philosophical issues.
It goes down to rationally derivable values. And it also goes down to this weird, I don't know, I was thinking about you saying about status. I was at this meeting a while ago and people are like, oh, if you want to get on this podcast, I'm like, fuck it, dude. I don't want to, like, I don't need it. Actually, Reed was at that meeting. Like, I don't really need any of this stuff. Let's help some young voices and elevate them. But one of the things, there is a kind of jockeying that goes on, and maybe it's just my space, and so I don't see much of it. But I was amazed. I'm going to do an event with, Dave Rubin's a very close friend of mine. I'm going to do an event with him this summer in July, I think, in Eastern Europe. And I am amazed at the amount of hate he gets. The sheer number of people who say, not that he's wrong, which is fine. That's a good criticism. In fact, I love those criticisms. But
yeah, for sure.
In fact,
that's the real deal. That's what we want, debate.
Yeah, we need more of those criticisms, but that he's insincere. And I've had this long conversations with him, and I can tell you in no uncertain terms, he is not insincere.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and I just find it to be, and you know, I know his family, I know his husband, I know his kids, and I just find these assaults to be, I don't know if it's status jockeying or I don't know. And you know, a long time ago, a great clip. He put out the clip of with Larry Elder. I mean, he could have just not put out that clip, right?
You mean his conversion moment?
Yeah, I mean, he could have just not put out that clip.
I mentioned that in the book. That's actually truly amazing, that moment. Like you can actually see his conversion to what we could call IDW space or whatever. It's very interesting.
Yeah, here it is. A young Dave with Larry Elder. Yeah, I mean, that was an extraordinary clip.
Truly amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and if the viewers haven't watched it, I highly recommend that you watch it. It was a conversion moment. Paul falls off his horse.
Yeah, I mean, he's asked, you know, well, what evidence do you have for that? And he's like, you're right. I'm just saying what sort of fashionable left-wing people say. Where's my evidence? Wow. I mean, I'm sure you get this with teaching all the time. You know, the students are saying stuff and you're like, okay, great. I hear you. Now what's the evidence? And they kind of like, well, yeah, then they call you a transphobe and get rid of you. But I mean, but the others, actually the majority sort of think a little bit. So yeah, it's interesting. Great moment.
Yeah. Okay. So we've seen the splinter. I guess I'm fortunate in that I've lost an awful lot of friends because of positions that I've taken. And folks have heard me say this before, but the number one position is you're 18, you do anything you want, you want to live any type of life you want to lead, go for it. But just this kid thing is just, and that's the other thing I think it really disturbs me. All these documents now about Andrew Tate's relationships have come out. Okay, so let's be completely clear about a few things. You can have any kind of, if you're 18 and you want to have a relationship with someone who's 18 and of sound mind, not necessarily body, they could be physically incapacitated, but of sound mind, you can have any kind of relationship you want. If you want to dabble in S&M or even full on, you're a consenting adult. That's different from being a child rapist. I mean, they're not even in the same category. And people cannot seem to, and I was thinking about this, but thinking about this a lot. The things that people simply cannot seem to differentiate between. They cannot seem to differentiate between illegal immigrants and immigrants. There must be something in that concept that is too complicated. And, and then, everyone's, putting out, Andrew Tate's ex-girlfriend and he, spanked her, whatever craziness or whatever his fetish was. Okay. That's his business. That's not your business. That's his business.
But we can distinguish between legal and moral. And I mean, I would have a lot of things to say in the moral realm about that stuff, but from a legal point of view, as you say, you're 18, you're consenting, that's another matter.
You're sovereign over your own body. You're sovereign over your own relationships. You have dominion over your life. And there has to become a time where you become an adult, and we don't isolate you or insulate you from those choices. You have to take responsibility and ownership of the choices and of your partners, et cetera. I realize it's a little more complicated than that, but that's the basic idea. So I think there's so much confusion that's going on. And I don't, there's so much confusion going on. And I really think that we lack voices, now that legacy media has more or less fallen. We used to have Dan Rather or Tom Brokaw, well, at least in my continent. We don't know who you had in the island over there, but we used to have these voices, and you would trust these, most trusted news network or what have you, but we don't have that. And so those gatekeepers have fallen, and we don't have the university system because that's ideologically corrupted. And so who do we have now? Like we go to these we have information silos by and large. And I'm concerned about other things. I agree with what you're saying. I'm still thinking about what you were saying about you don't want to narrow who you can have on your show so much so that you're not taking in voices. When I used to teach science and pseudoscience, I had people come in, Mark Sargent, for example, who argued and wrote a book, and I actually read the whole book. It was massive. Why the Earth is flat. He believes a flat earther. And the shit I caught from my colleagues and people online for that. But why shouldn't they? He's not coming into a math class. I teach science and pseudoscience. It's totally appropriate to have this guy come in and say whatever his, and then I gave the students tools that they could ask his questions. They ask great questions, falsifiability questions, et cetera, et cetera. But there is a kind of, we're not training the populace to ask the right questions. We're not training people. And I think that the IDW sparked that initially, like open inquiry, free dialogue. You have to stand up to craziness. You have to ask for evidence. You have to hold people accountable. And I just think that we're losing that wholesale. And I think that the rate of loss is, I wouldn't say it's exponentially greater, but the people who are now teaching in positions of authority, they themselves have gone through indoctrination mills. And so they themselves haven't had the benefit of having a Socratic or dialectical education. And the consequence of that, they're just teaching conclusions, or they're teaching false epistemologies. Have you ever seen this, this thing? You hold a knowing stick and then you go around. Have you seen this? So it's
I
like,
haven't.
okay, this is like, I did this at a recent university fairly recently. I won't say too much about it. And then I questioned the people about it later, and she got really upset at me. But basically, everybody goes around. You sit in a circle. I can't remember what it's called. It's a weird pedagogical name, and everybody holds this like, talking stick. And when only the person who's holding the stick can talk, and then basically the stick, you go in a clockwise. Oh, I think that time was a counterclockwise motion. And I just remember being so struck by that, because nothing that anybody else says has to relate to anything anybody has previously said. So it's basically your lived experience. So it's just a time for your voice to be heard without any kind of interwovenness or connection to anything. And I'm not sure what the point of that is. But anyway,
that just sounds like yet another of the radical postmodern
applied postmodernism. Yeah, it's applied postmodernism.
Yeah, it's pastiche in itself, and it's I see it in the professors or the highest ranking academics, in my department and where I teach. It's the classic problem we're all fighting against at the very heart of it. My truth's as good as your truth, and it's just a fundamental error, because they mean opinion, and then yet they use the word truth. It's this strange sleight of hand. You get all the you get all the the prestige from using the word truth, but without any evidence standards.
So maybe,
these are all the tricks. These are all the tricks.
Maybe this conversation is more cathartic for me than the conversation interview, but the level of frustration that I've experienced at things that were so idiotic that literal, fifth graders can figure out, like name calling or you're not a racist.
I hear. I deal with it all at uni. I deal with it all constantly. And so much of this stuff, it falls over at the first hurdle. Just the most obvious points, some of which I make in the book. If my truth's as good as your truth, then you shouldn't be drawing a salary. It falls over immediately. There's so many points where it's just, just utterly ridiculous that we're even talking about this in the first place. And as you say, I got a comment from a student a year or so ago. They're saying Jamie says there are things he can't say anymore at university. I don't know where they got the anymore from, but yeah, Jamie says there's things he can't say. He should be removed from teaching this course. You're like, okay, there's been a few ... They also called me a transphobe and a misogynist and a bunch of other stuff, but that was the gist of the comment. And you're like, do you see that comment falls over at the first hurdle, and you've just proven why I'm trying to talk about cancel culture?
See,
it's idiotic. I've heard you say this many times. It's just uniquely stupid times that we live in. Yeah. None of it makes any sense. It falls over at the first hurdle. And yet, as you say, we've got academics who have been groomed, and it is grooming. They've been rewarded for saying all the crazy stuff for 20 or 30 years.
There you go again. You tried to keep that up for a second. You tried to use reason and evidence to dismantle an argument that wasn't made by reason and evidence. They don't hold the position because of reason and evidence. No. So let's look at this.
No, they've been. This is the thing. God knows how it all got started, but my sense is, when I often try to think about how it all got started, sure, we could trace it back to Marxism, but my sense more is that postmodernism or post-structuralism or whatever you want to call it, at its core, it's just a weakening of the evidence standard for knowledge, which then allows second and third-rate intellectuals, they're not even intellectuals, second or third-rate individuals to get into the institutions, write papers, claim they've produced knowledge, and climb the ranks. And so basically, once you have all these second and third-rate people playing the same games, and there's got to be a great corpus of bullshit. And once that corpus reaches a certain critical mass and everyone just signals back and forth, then everyone has their careers. And somehow this, who knows how it managed to get started, but it got started because maybe, when you disagree, everyone starts name calling, and if you're a sort of vaguely reasonable human person, you feel a bit bad about that and a bit shocked. And so it's this strange mixture of schoolyard name calling with weakened epistemological standards. And that's how, I don't know, in a nutshell, the universities got corrupted, and now it's spread out into the wider world. It's got taken up by the trans movement. identity politics. Yeah, and like as I say, I've heard you say this many times. It's like a uniquely stupid moment. Anyway, yeah.
So I want to talk about two things. I want to talk about criticisms of people in the IDW, and then I want to talk about, this is Jim's post. Oh, that was my idea laundering. I posted that in the Wall Street Journal a while ago. But Reed, go back to
great concept, which is kind of what I was talking about then. Yeah,
exactly.
ideal
That's why
it's another version of it for sure.
Yeah, we are the fake news now. The problem with modern media, there are too many bullets now. You silence Joe Rogan, here comes Candace Owens, who has gone to complete crazy town, like total crazy town. You take out Owens, here comes Ian Carroll. You take out Carroll. So the gatekeepers, when I was a kid, it was ABC, CBS, and NBC. Those were the big ones. And then CNN came and they went, and then MSNBC is in complete crazy town. And then there's also Fox, and they're in their kind of echo chambery crazy town, but in a very, very different way.
Yeah, the right's taking some strange twists and turns in the US. Yeah, the anti-Churchill stuff. The anti-Americanism there as well. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, I wonder if it is the penchant drama. It's funny. I was thinking about the other day of somebody was just asking me a question. I was thinking about how I remember the charges people used to level against me. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, that's not just insane. It's what Jim would call the iron law of woke projection. It's exactly the opposite of what is the case that you don't do to yourself. I would literally go around the world, planet Earth, and I would tell people, and there are like, I don't even countless videos of me doing this. If you disagree with me, you get to go to the front of the line. So this is not online people. Boghossian doesn't engage people who disagrees with. Like I go to, it was so crazy. I challenge people to debates. I don't do that anymore. Now I strongly prefer conversations. I do the W path thing. I invite them. I invite myself. Nothing. So the very thing that they were criticizing for, but now now I've noticed it's shifting. It's shifting the kinds of criticisms that I receive. And for all I know, it could be the same 5 people who are just like, just constantly sock puppets. I don't know. But it's so interesting to me that in none of those criticisms are ever substantive. I will say this about Christians, which I'm coming to respect more and more. Their criticism.
I know, right? Isn't it funny? Who'd have thought in the 90s or so, back when I was, so anti-Christian in my, 9-inch nails kind of phase, who'd have thought that now the Christians are the great allies? But anyway, keep going.
Well, no, it's amazing. I mean, their criticisms, there are a few people who are obviously completely insane, but a lot of those criticisms were substantive criticisms of ideas. And I did to the extent I answered the most substantive of those. And I thought that they were, to borrow a Christian phrase, in good faith and largely. But this is not that. I mean, this is something, this is up, and we have 12 minutes left, and then we have Reed has to go hard out. So we have to finish in 12. But so it's another example. And I find repeatedly over and over again, my biggest supporters, without question, are religious people. Which is,
it's wild, isn't it? I'm finding the same thing. Like I'm having, various troubles at uni, and who have I become friends with in the last year or so? Like Christians, really decent people who I can talk to, even if I don't believe.
Yeah, by the metaphysics. I remember once there was something at a university where I will not name, where I used to teach, where a group of, and I just want to be crystal clear, I'll show you all my cards. I'm pro-choice in the first trimester. In the second trimester, if you have a damn good reason, and I'm against it in the third trimester. And I mean a damn good reason, like you were kidnapped in someone's basement by a rapist or something like that. But I'm pro-choice oh God, it hurt my back, in the first trimester. And so I remember once there was some group of, Christians, I can't remember the name of the group, but they wanted to post pictures of aborted fetuses in the, on campus. And they were a legitimate group. They were a student group. They weren't external to the institution. And holy shit, the people went crazy. And my response was, if you don't like it, tough shit. You're in a university now. Like,
yeah,
they have if they're illegals, if they're a student group, an official student group, and they want to post pictures of aborted fetuses in this, I said the same thing about the people who posted videos. They had this video projector of like these ghastly, and I mean, dude, this shit was ghastly. If you've ever seen a slaughterhouse.
I was just going to say, it's the same stuff that vegans do.
And I said, you know what? They have every right to do that. And the shit that I caught for that was crazy. So it's not about the conclusion, you know, it's that, and it's just so obvious. These things are so obvious. That's why you're right. It is uniquely stupid. I forgot that I said
it's like, you know, I mean, I've been dealing with this since 2002 when I first, you know, started getting in trouble at the university for talking about obvious things. But yeah, I mean, almost the entirety of my adult life, or indeed professional adult life, has been defined by just this endless sense of, just utter despair that I can't talk about the most obvious things, and I can't even make the most straightforward arguments. And if I do, I'm going to get whacked. And I mean,
all right,
you know, every year or two something bad happens. Someone complains. It could be bigger, it could be smaller. You know, there's some drama. You know, your book gets canceled, whatever. It's just always something.
Yeah. All right. So let me read. Post that thing, Gravit Heist there. What's the best way to identify expertise? Let me just be clear about something. I remember I read a long time ago Tom Nichols' book, The Death of Expertise. Let me just be clear about something. Nobody questions expertise when you're going in for a colonoscopy.
No. Well, not much.
Nobody questions.
You look for a good doctor, but yeah.
Nobody questions expertise at 30,000 feet in the air, right? The problem is that we have, you know, I think that this is where the right has failed catastrophically. They've universally attacked expertise. But one of the reasons they've universally attacked expertise is because the left has handed it to them in a softball pitch by saying, look at Harvard's acceptance rates, for example, the Ivies, the elite institutions' acceptance rates, the demeaning of the meritocracy, the demeaning of, you know, skills, saying everything is racist, saying everything is, this is great, by the way. Thank you for putting that up, Reed. If you haven't seen this, this is awesome. So this guy is Nathan, and his shows are on HBO. Is that correct, Reed? I think it's on HBO. His Nathan For You is one of the best series I've ever seen in my life. I don't even know what genre to put it in, but his series is season 2 of The Rehearsal. I cannot recommend this highly enough. Well, I mean, there's only been one episode so far, but I cannot recommend his work highly enough. But he talks about why all plane crashes, planes crash. And oddly enough, it's a comedy, but it sounds weird. But one of the reasons that he finds, and I'm not saying this is true, I'm just saying that this is what he found, is that there's a lack of conversation between the pilot and the co-pilot. And if the co-pilot thinks that something should go on, they're hesitant to relay this to the pilot. Anyway, but my point is
basic dialectic.
The Rehearsal, taking ideas personally. So I think that it's not answering the question, but the idea that there is no expertise, that's insane. Like that. And but I do.
Of course, it's it. But you know, Jordan Peterson, like you know, like the word he's almost most famous for is competence. You know, Jordan Peterson was always saying that. So, I mean, for someone who's just about at the core of the IDW, he was very, very keen to push the fact that there is expertise, and that a society that values competence will clearly then value expertise. It's just that, as you say, the left has degraded the institution so badly that then the right goes nuts and throws the baby out with the bathwater. So, we need our institutions to get back to actually caring about reasoning and evidence and truth and reality, and figuring out what we ought to do based on our knowledge of reality. So the left plays that's the core of it.
That's not center right. And anybody,
it's not left or right. It's called basic survival. It's what humanity needs. It's what civilization needs at its bedrock. We need to have mechanisms for understanding reality so that we can figure out how best to act. I mean, it's not left or right. They're the basic rules of the game. But the whole postmodern thing has completely exploded the basic rules of the game. And that's why, you know, you will then see like aspects of the right saying there is no expertise. It's like, no. You're just reacting to the insanity of the left. I mean, yeah, it's just, it's tragic. It's tragic.
I also want to stress, if people think that expertise is an illusion, then why don't you go to a jiu-jitsu studio and find a black belt or a brown belt or even a purple belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu and tell them that you think that the idea of expertise is bullshit and that you would like to challenge them to choke you into submission, or go to an MMA place and tell them that
for sure
you would like to fight them until someone passes out. And then
you talked about this on Rogan. You talked about this on Rogan a decade ago, and it's one of the key aspects of IDW thinking is engaging with the unforgiving, engaging with a type of reality where you actually can't argue with it. And that's the issue.
Yeah, and I mean, I said years ago, like, why are there no midgets on professional basketball teams? People went crazy on me. It just, there's just like that whole monarch thing. Like, there's just, I don't know, like, it's just at some point there has to be, because, you know, I've been really thinking about this idea of constructing institutions around the idea of error correction and falsifiability. We only have 4 minutes, so we actually have 2 minutes, so we'd have to start out. But so real quick, if anybody has a super chat, let us know. Real quick, is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't know we should have, you know, talked? I think I went on a little too long, but we should have talked about.
I mean, we've hit a lot of key IDW points. I mean, we kind of raced through a bunch of them, but it's kind of fun when it's a bit wilder. I don't know. No, I mean, look, nothing specific comes to mind. I mean, there's always aspects we can dig into a little deeper, but we have hit a lot of the key aspects of the IDW.
Cool. Where can people find your work and your book?
I mean, you find my book on the internet. I mean, it's out through Pitchstone, a US publisher. So you type like that title and my name into the internet, and then, you know, you buy it on Amazon.
Web, a history and possible future. And I love Pitchstone. They've been nothing but amazing to me.
I know, right? Like I get canceled, and I'm like, I leap into the void, and I'm like, geez, I've written this whole damn book, and it's gone. And then I write to Pitchstone, and and it's like, we'll publish your book. It was tremendous.
They're incredible. Yeah. And then you're on Twitter, Jamie Q Roberts. Okay, so keep your browser open. Reed has a heart out. Thanks, Jamie, for coming on. Thanks for writing that book. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
And a pleasure. Keep your browser open, and thanks everybody. And of course, thanks to Reed for helping out.